The flashing blue lights cut through the morning fog like warning beacons from another world. I was standing barefoot on the dew-soaked grass behind my cabin, coffee mug still warm in my hand, when two squad cars crunched to a stop on the gravel road. The smell of pine and wet earth filled the air. Loons called across the still water of Lake Serenity, their song peaceful, until a woman's shrill voice shattered it. "There! That's him! He's trespassing!" Brenda Carmichael stood on the deck of her oversized mansion across the cove, wrapped in a bright pink robe that looked like it cost more than my entire truck. Her manicured finger pointed straight at me like she was unveiling a criminal on live television. The younger cop looked confused. The older one just sighed, like a man who'd seen this movie too many times. "Sir," he started, one hand resting on his duty belt, "we've received a report of trespassing." "On my own property?" I asked, setting my coffee on the porch rail. "Because that's a new one." Quote. I could see Brenda's reflection glinting off the lake's surface, her arms folded, her face twisted into satisfaction. She thought she'd won. She didn't know I was holding a royal flush. "My name's Marcus Reed, and 3 years ago I thought I'd found paradise. After 20 years of military logistics and one divorce that took everything but my sanity, I inherited my grandfather's old cabin on Lake Serenity, Minnesota. Population 3,200, where the loudest thing most days was a chainsaw or a kid cannonballing off a dock. The cabin sat on 2 acres of wooded shoreline, built from cedar and stubbornness in 1963. Every morning, I'd wake up to fog rolling off the lake like a silver blanket. I'd breathe in pine needles, damp soil, and that faint metallic smell of fresh water. It reminded me that peace didn't always come with silence. It came with the sound of loons, wind, and the occasional fish jumping near the dock. For 2 years, life was good. Folks waved when you passed. People helped when someone's dock broke loose, or when storms knocked out the power. Nobody cared what kind of boat you had or if your mailbox matched your neighbor's. It was simple, decent, until Brenda arrived. She blew into town like a pink cardigan hurricane with too much perfume and not enough humility. Bought the biggest house on the lake, an $800,000 McMansion that looked like a suburban shopping mall dropped in the middle of the Minnesota woods. Her first week, she introduced herself to half the lake from her pontoon boat, wearing blinding white capri and a smile that could cut glass. "I'm Brenda Carmichael," she'd say, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "President of the new Lake Serenity Homeowners Association." Nobody remembered voting for her. When her pontoon pulled up to my dock that Saturday morning, I already knew it wasn't going to end well. The lake was mirror still. Steam rose off my coffee, and then her engine growled through the quiet like a lawnmower on a funeral lawn. "Yoo-hoo! Hello there, neighbor!" she called out, waving a manila folder. "I'm here on official HOA business." I blinked. "We don't have an HOA." Quote, "Well," she said, her fake smile flickering, "we do now, and as president it's my responsibility to maintain community standards. I'm afraid your rustic setup doesn't align with the new aesthetic guidelines." My rustic setup was a cedar dock older than she was and a 12-foot aluminum boat that had caught more fish than her fancy pontoon ever would. She looked around like she was inspecting a crime scene. "That aluminum eyesore has to go, and frankly, all this fishing gear scattered around makes the area look, well, unkempt. We can't have property values declining." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Lady, this property's been in my family since before you were born. There's no HOA, and I sure as hell didn't sign up for one." Her smile turned sharp. "We'll see about that, won't we, soldier boy?" Then she gunned her pontoon engine, spraying my dock with lake water and the stench of expensive fuel. The wake rocked my boat hard enough to spill my mug. That's when I realized Brenda wasn't just annoying. She was dangerous in the way only people who believe they're always right can be. 3 days later, I found an envelope taped to my front door. Lake Serenity Homeowners Association Violation Notice. Inside was a letter printed on fancy letterhead, complete with fake seals and legal-sounding nonsense about dock aesthetic violations and failure to maintain community standards. They were demanding $500 in fines and threatening additional property liens. I laughed out loud. Nice try, Brenda. Still, something about the official tone made me curious. So I drove into Cedar Falls Courthouse, where the basement smelled like mildew, dust, and old paper. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like tired hornets. Behind the counter sat Dolores, a 70-year-old clerk who'd clearly seen it all. Her glasses were held together with tape, and she smelled faintly of peppermint and old books. "Another HOA victim, huh?" she asked, pulling my file from a cabinet. "You're not the first, honey. That Carmichael woman's been in here 6 times this month, asking about enforcement authority she doesn't have." We both leaned over the documents. My deed was crystal clear. No covenants, no restrictions, no HOA jurisdiction. But while flipping through the files, something else caught my eye. Half a dozen lakefront properties had changed ownership recently, transferred to Carmichael Holdings LLC. "Looks like she's been buying up the lake," I murmured. Dolores chuckled. "Buying trouble, more like it." When I got home, I poured a whiskey and started digging online. Turns out Brenda wasn't just forming a fake HOA. She was running an unlicensed short-term rental business, turning quiet family cabins into party houses for city tourists. The woman lecturing us about community values was the one destroying them. That night, I made a post in our local Facebook group. "Anyone else getting violation letters from the new Lake Serenity HOA?" Within an hour, my inbox exploded. 8 different neighbors messaged me with stories about Brenda's harassment. She'd threatened to fine an elderly widow for her bird feeders, yelled at a young couple about their non-compliant mailbox, and even tried to get a dock worker fired for using unapproved paint. One neighbor, Janet, a retired librarian, had been documenting everything: photos, letters, timestamps. She even had a binder labeled Brenda's Nonsense, Volume 1. That night, under the hum of my porch light, we formed what we called the Truth Squad, a group chat of fed-up lake residents determined to expose Brenda's lies. I didn't know it yet, but this little group of ordinary neighbors was about to become Brenda's worst nightmare. Because if there's one thing the Army taught me, it's this: before you fight back, you gather intel. And by morning, we'd have enough evidence to make even the boldest HOA queen regret picking this battle. By the next morning, the fog on Lake Serenity had burned off, but the air still smelled heavy with pine and trouble. I sat on my porch, boots up, sipping coffee that had cooled into bitterness. Across the water, Brenda's massive white house gleamed like a misplaced wedding cake. That's when I saw a county pickup crunching up my driveway. The seal on the door read Cedar Falls Code Enforcement, and the man climbing out looked about as enthusiastic as a dentist at a chili cook-off. "Mr. Reed?" he asked, checking his clipboard. "Name's Tom Hendricks. Got a report here about possible dock violations and an abandoned vehicle." He looked around, scratching the back of his neck. "Mind if I take a look?" "Be my guest," I said, motioning toward the lake. We walked down to my dock. The boards creaked beneath our boots. The sun glinted off the calm water, and a loon dove in the distance. Tom measured, scribbled, measured again, then shook his head with the weary patience of a man who knew nonsense when he saw it. "Between you and me," he said, lowering his voice, "this is the 23rd complaint I've had from that Carmichael address in 6 months. Last week she tried to slip me $100 for expedited inspections." Quote. He said it like a confession. "Guess she doesn't realize bribing officials is frowned upon in civilized society," I muttered. Tom grinned. "You'd be surprised how many people forget that." When he left, the sound of gravel under his tires felt like punctuation at the end of a long, ridiculous sentence. That evening, the Truth Squad gathered for the first time in person. We met at Janet's place, a cozy cedar cabin that smelled like old books and oatmeal cookies. She'd set out a pot of coffee and a stack of manila folders thick enough to choke a paper shredder. "Brenda's running this fake HOA like it's a private kingdom," Janet said, flipping through her notes. "But she's sloppy. Half her so-called members are just tenants in her rental properties." Tom from the marina showed up carrying photos. "She owes me $3,000 in fuel bills," he said, slapping down evidence like cards at a poker table. "Tried to threaten me with legal action when I cut her off. Even Florence, a 90-year-old widow who lived near the boat launch, had joined us. She arrived wearing a floral sweater and carrying lemon bars. She told me my bird feeders violated her community wildlife guidelines, Florence said. I told her where she could shove her guidelines, dear. The group burst into laughter, the kind that releases tension like a popped balloon. But beneath it, there was something else. A shared sense that enough was enough. We decided on a plan. We'd gather documents, record her threats, and track every false complaint she filed. Evidence was power. And Brenda had just handed us a mountain of it. The next day, I got a call from Brenda herself. Her voice oozed through the phone line, sticky sweet but sharp underneath. Marcus, honey, I saw your little Facebook post. You're making this very difficult for yourself. I leaned back in my chair, watching sunlight ripple across the lake. Just asking questions, Brenda. That's still legal, right? She let out a short laugh that didn't sound amused. You really don't want to go down this road with me. I have connections. Connections? I asked. Like the county clerk you tried to bribe? The silence that followed was golden. Then she snapped. You'll regret this. Click. The line went dead. By midweek, the harassment escalated. County trucks showed up twice in one day. Once for a noise complaint, I'd been fixing my fence, and once for a hazardous materials inspection, my gas can for the lawnmower. Each time, the same officers apologized while explaining they had to respond to every call. Even they looked embarrassed. One evening, I sat on my dock, watching the sunset set the water ablaze with orange light. The air smelled like pine, and the faint sweetness of wood smoke drifting from someone's grill across the lake. I could hear laughter from families eating dinner outside. That's when I realized something had shifted. People who'd never spoken to me before were waving, smiling, stopping by with casseroles and coffee. The Truth Squad had turned into something bigger, a community tired of being afraid of one woman's tantrums. Friday morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Deputy Rodriguez, the local sheriff's officer who'd handled most of Brenda's complaints. Need to talk. Drop by the station when you can. When I arrived, the air smelled of burnt coffee and disinfectant. Rodriguez leaned against his desk, arms crossed, expression serious. Off the record, he said, we'd been tracking her calls. 27 in 4 months, all against the same 5 people, you included. None held up under investigation. He handed me a printout. Brenda's name filled line after line after line. Keep documenting everything, he said. Nothing criminal yet, but she's dancing on the edge. As I left the station, I felt that old military instinct stirring again. The one that told me this wasn't over, it was just changing shape. 3 days later, I got a call from Arthur Payton, my grandfather's old lawyer. His voice carried that tired, careful tone of someone who'd seen too many people dig their own graves with arrogance. Marcus, I've been reviewing some old estate records, he said. You might want to come in. His office smelled of cigars and dust. Law books towered on every wall, like fortresses of old wisdom. Arthur spread a series of documents across his mahogany desk. Deeds, trust agreements, signatures dating back decades. When your grandfather passed, he said, you inherited more than just the cabin. You're the majority stakeholder in a trust that owns 4 properties around this lake. I froze. 4 properties? He nodded, including one currently occupied by a Ms. Brenda Carmichael. For a long second, I couldn't speak. Then I laughed. One of those deep, incredulous laughs that come when the universe finally decides to balance its scales. Arthur smiled. She's 2 months behind on rent and in violation of half her lease clauses. I leaned back in my chair, feeling something between relief and poetic justice. So she's been harassing her own landlord. Exactly. Arthur tapped a thick folder marked eviction proceedings. We can end this whenever you're ready. That evening, I stood on my dock as twilight fell. The lake was glassy and calm, reflecting the fading pink of sunset. Fireflies blinked near the tree line. Somewhere across the water, Brenda's mansion glowed in the dark like a neon sign of arrogance. I thought of my grandfather, his rough hands, his quiet wisdom. Before you fight City Hall, make sure you know who actually runs the city. I smiled. Guess I just found out. Tomorrow, I'd make my move. Brenda had declared war. But she didn't know she'd been living on my battlefield the entire time. The next morning, sunlight poured through my cabin windows like liquid gold. And the lake looked peaceful enough to make you forget there was a war brewing. I sipped my coffee, the smell of roasted beans and pine mixing in the cool air. Across the water, Brenda's mansion shimmered in the early light, white, perfect and fake as the smile she wore. I'd made my choice. No more hiding, no more dodging her nonsense. It was time for the truth to come out. Arthur and I had drawn up what he called the clean sweep plan. I called it poetic justice. Step 1. Give Brenda a chance to make things right. Step 2. If she refused, reveal everything. Step 3. Evict the self-appointed queen from her fake throne. I started with diplomacy. I called her Miss Carmichael. I said when she answered, her tone already dripping with irritation. I'd like to meet, not as neighbors, just as two people who share property concerns. There was a pause, then a laugh that sounded like broken glass. Oh, Marcus, you're adorable. I don't meet with bullies. My attorney will contact you if necessary. Click. That was her last chance. Within days, the Truth Squad had gathered enough evidence to make a prosecutor grin. Janet had photos of her rental violations, Tom had receipts for unpaid dock fees, and even Florence, bless her heart, had video of Brenda screaming at delivery drivers. Then came the final straw. Tuesday morning, I walked down to my dock to find my fishing boat half sunk. The drain plug had been removed with surgical precision. The smell of gas and lake water hit me like a punch. $2, $800 in damage, easy. My security camera had caught everything. A pickup truck idling in the dark, a man crouching by the boat, muttering to himself about crazy lady jobs. That video went straight to Deputy Rodriguez. He showed up within an hour, notebook in hand. The smell of wet pine hung in the air as we stood by the dock. This crossed a line, he said, crouching to inspect the damage. That's felony territory, Marcus. Don't worry, we'll handle it. His words were calm, but his eyes told me everything. Brenda had finally gone too far. By midweek, her empire started to crack. The marina banned her after she screamed at a teenage clerk. The grocery store refused her service when she accused the cashier of, quote, harassment pricing. Even her own renters were bailing out after discovering the legal mess surrounding her vacation listings. The truth was spreading faster than lake gossip at a fish fry. Then Thursday came, the day I'll never forget, the town council meeting. If you've never seen 300 small-town folks pack into a high school gym for a showdown, imagine a courtroom mixed with a church service and a rodeo. The smell of coffee, popcorn, and tension filled the air. Arthur sat beside me, sharp as ever in his Navy suit, calm as a man who'd seen too many trials to be nervous. Brenda arrived late, flanked by a slick-looking lawyer in a $1,000 suit and an ego that could have filled the gym by itself. She strutted in wearing a white blazer and sunglasses indoors, like some celebrity walking into court. The council chair banged his gavel. Let's begin. Mr. Reed, you requested to speak first. I stood up, holding my folder, the same one Arthur and I had spent weeks building. My boots echoed against the gym floor. Every eye followed me to the podium. 3 months ago, I began. I thought I was dealing with a neighborly misunderstanding, but what I've discovered goes far beyond that. Arthur switched on the projector. Property documents appeared on the wall, each one crisp, undeniable. My voice stayed steady. I own the property Brenda Carmichael lives in. Through my grandfather's trust, I've been her landlord for the past 3 years. The room gasped. Then someone laughed. Then everyone did. The sound filled the gym. Relief, justice, disbelief. Even the sheriff cracked a grin. Brenda froze in her chair, her mouth slightly open, color draining from her face. Arthur continued, outlining her lease violations, illegal business use, failure to pay rent, and harassment of other tenants. Each slide landed like a hammer. When the video of her handyman sabotaging my boat played on the big screen, the audience erupted in angry murmurs. Rodriguez stood from the back, notebook in hand. "That's enough for a felony report," he said aloud. Brenda's lawyer jumped up, sputtering about context and character assassination, but the laughter drowned him out. Florence, sitting in the front row, yelled, "Character! That woman's got more drama than a soap opera!" The crowd howled. When the noise settled, I held up a single sheet of paper, an official eviction notice. "Ms. Carmichael," I said, my voice carrying across the room, "as your landlord, you're hereby given 30 days to vacate for multiple lease violations. Consider this your formal notice." Quote, applause thundered through the gym. People stood, clapping, whistling, cheering. The sound rolled like waves against the walls. Even the council chair looked ready to high-five me. Brenda stood trembling, her lawyer trying to guide her toward the exit. "This is harassment," she screamed. "This is a conspiracy." "Ma'am," Deputy Rodriguez said, stepping closer, "please calm down." She didn't. She stormed out, slamming the gym doors hard enough to rattle the basketball hoops. The next morning the headlines read, "Lake Serenity HOA Queen evicted by her own landlord." The story spread like wildfire. Local news vans parked by the lake, interviewing neighbors who'd spent months living under her tyranny. Each retelling grew more colorful, but the message stayed the same. Justice had come home. Brenda left within 2 weeks, her mansion stripped of the fake HOA headquarters sign she'd hung by the driveway. Her U-Haul rattled down the gravel road, taillights fading behind a cloud of dust. The community threw a potluck that weekend to celebrate. Grilled fish, homemade pies, and enough laughter to echo across the lake until midnight. Florence made a toast with sweet tea, her voice shaking but strong. "To peace, and to neighbors who stand up to bullies." The crowd cheered. Months passed. The air turned crisp, the trees burned gold, and Lake Serenity earned its name again. The Truth Squad evolved into something better, a real neighborhood council. We worked with the county to clean the shoreline, repair docks, and establish fair guidelines that actually helped people instead of punishing them. Janet and I started seeing each other, slowly, quietly, like two people who'd survived the same storm and found shelter in the same sunrise. Some nights we'd sit on my dock, her hand resting on mine, the air smelling of pine, rain, and second chances. One evening, as the sun melted into the water, I heard loons calling, their song soft and haunting. I thought about my grandfather, the man who'd built this cabin, who'd believed good people could still win if they stood their ground. He was right. Sometimes justice doesn't come in courtrooms. Sometimes it comes on quiet lakes, through ordinary people who refuse to be bullied. I raised my coffee mug toward the horizon. "Here's to Lake Serenity," I whispered. "May it stay that way." The wind carried the sound of laughter from across the shore. The smell of cedar and peace wrapped around me like an old, trusted blanket. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly home.